So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. The title of our webinar today is called Understanding the Mental Health Challenges Autistics Often Face. This is hosted by the Florida Center for Inclusive Communities at the University of South Florida. We are considered one of the two University Centers of Excellence in Education on Developmental Disabilities here in the state of Florida, and one of 64, if I'm not mistaken, nationwide. This is also a collaboration with the Florida Association for Persons Supporting Employment First. And I am so honored to have our speaker today, who is a professional with lived experience. And I'm going to let her do her own bio for this presentation. So she'll do that on the next slide. And then she will talk through her slides, and then I will do some announcements and things at the end of this presentation. Thank you. Chanel, you want to introduce yourself?
We can go ahead and switch to the next slide. Okay, great. My name is Charnel Widnall, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor with a group practice in Tampa, specializing in mental health counseling for autistic teens and adults. I am also autistic, so I am able to speak to you today about autism and mental health, not only as a professional, having worked closely with hundreds of autistics from diverse backgrounds and with diverse profiles, but also as someone with lived experience. In addition to my work as a mental health counselor, I've also worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor and as a counselor at a high school transition program for kids with intellectual disabilities, many of whom were also autistic. So in addition to my experience in private practice, I've also worked very closely with autistics and their families as they navigate specifically that transition from school to employment. Okay, next slide. Autism and mental health is a pretty massive and complex topic, and I do hope that you find the topics that I have chosen to be relevant in some way to your purposes for being here. We will start with autistic burnout, and this is where we'll spend the majority of our time. Then we will turn to pathological demand avoidance, and then some commonly co-occurring physical medical conditions that have a significant impact on mental health. We will finish by speaking briefly about trauma. For your own planning purposes, I intend to speak for about 45 minutes and then answer questions should there be any. Okay, next. So starting with how autistic burnout is defined. It's considered a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without adequate supports. It's characterized by pervasive long-term exhaustion. And people experiencing chronic exhaustion will report feeling an absolute depletion of energy from overextending themselves in daily life. They will also report a loss of function or skills. So this refers to decreased skills in thinking, remembering, creating, and executing plans, performing activities of daily living, socializing, communicating, and regulating emotions. These are skills that they had before the burnout and that are then lost during the burnout, and sometimes do not return to baseline afterwards. For some people who experience more significant skill regression with burnout, this can be, as you can imagine, very scary, especially for those whose job or relationships depend on them being competent in skills that they begin to lose. And reduced tolerance to stimulus is the last characteristic of autistic burnout. People will experience being more sensitive than usual to environmental stimuli and less capable of tuning stimuli out. Essentially, stimulation and sensory experiences or environments that a person could once handle or enjoy are no longer being tolerated. It can be confusing for the people around the person experiencing this, as they might not understand why a person might have been able to enjoy a situation in the past, but is now stating it is too loud or crowded. And we can try to understand what that must be like for the person who's experiencing decreased tolerance to a stimulation, and those around them are telling them that it shouldn't be a problem, or that it is not that loud, or that they did it before, so they should be able to do it now. How does a person or a child cope in such conditions when the internal experience is being dismissed or misunderstood by those that know them most? So autistic children whose caretakers are not able to attune to their internal experience may begin to not trust their own ability to assess and identify their own needs. And when a child says they're in distress or have a particular need, and the parent or caretakers around them do not validate this, the child learns that they themselves cannot be trusted, that others know more than them, and that their own needs, what they want, not only is it not to be trusted, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of my work with adults is helping them to notice and name their needs and desires and develop trust in their ability to do so. Because when we cannot, we push ourselves past our natural capacity, leading to burnout. And I will speak more to this point when we look at how to treat autistic burnout. But in addition, being able to notice and name our needs also may protect us from being physically, emotionally, or sexually abused. I've worked with quite a few adults who, as children, had been encouraged to dismiss their own instincts and comply to the expectations set by others around them. And when a person has become so used to being in distress, when they learn to always say yes, despite their body saying no, they may have difficulty saying no when they get older. Many of the people that contact me for counseling are struggling with autistic burnout or are trying to prevent the onset of it. They're completely depleted, and they recognize that the way they've been doing things is not sustainable. And they fear what might happen if they make any changes. A person might recognize that they can't keep showing up for their family, but that if they stop, their partner might leave them or their children will be hurt. They might recognize that they can't keep up with their responsibilities at work or school anymore, but if they don't, they'll get fired or fail. Next slide. Okay, so here we have a visual that reflects the different aspects that contribute to burnout. On the left, we have life stressors, and on the right, the barriers to support. Essentially, the expectations and effort exerted outweighs the support or relief or recharge that the individual needs. The person needs a break, but they can't get one. It's too much. And despite the person's efforts to keep going, the body no longer allows it. One sign many of my clients report noticing prior to the onset of autistic burnout or during it is a decreased ability to mask. So I want to speak about this. Next, please. Okay. Masking has a significant and often invisible impact on autistic people, both being something that helps a person get by in the world, but also being something that contributes to exhaustion and burnout. So, what is masking? Masking is a complex strategy in which autistic individuals suppress natural behaviors and adopt neurotypical social traits. This can include imitating others' gestures or tone, forcing eye contact, scripting conversations, and stifling stimming or sensory responses. It can even include just going out to events when you would rather stay home and miss due to the emotional and physical cost. So it requires constant monitoring, self-suppression, and performance of socially acceptable behaviors that do not come naturally, which places a heavy and ongoing load on the nervous system. And over time, Masking can lead to chronic exhaustion, anxiety, depression, as we're speaking to autistic burnout, as well as a loss of connection to one's authentic self. Many autistic individuals internalize the message that who they are is unacceptable, which can damage self-esteem and make relationships feel unsafe or, as you can imagine, conditional. I want to give you some examples of masking. First, forcing eye contact. Some people learn to stare at someone's forehead instead of making direct eye contact due to discomfort experienced in direct eye contact. Or the person might make direct eye contact, but the cost is they cannot understand what the person says and now needs to find a way to maintain conversation when they are not fully present. I have had many people tell me, I can make eye contact, but I won't understand what you say if I do. Next, scripting conversations. Social interactions often require a lot of preparation prior to the event. So time is spent preparing what to say beforehand, such as conversation topics, specific questions, or things to say. Mimicking. Copying others' body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, or even dress. I remember once I got off the phone and my son had been sitting next to me and he looked at me and he asked why I was talking like that. I realized that I had copied aspects of the other person's language to such an extent that I had sounded quite odd to my son. And I think this is one reason why autistics often report, myself included, that it is hard to bring people from different parts of your life together, like different friend groups. Because for me, it feels very vulnerable, almost embarrassing as I engage so differently with the different types of people in my life that I would not know how to talk or be if they were all together. I hope that makes sense. Next, hiding interests. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Downplaying or avoiding intense personal interests to not seem weird. So this is hiding interests. When autistic people are taught explicitly or implicitly that they should hide their special interests or avoid talking about them because they are too intense, it can have a profound impact on their mental health, communication, and relationships. Special interests are not just hobbies. They are primary way many autistic people think, regulate, and communicate authentically. Autistic communication is often depth-based, and sharing a special interest is how meaning, connection, and emotional expression are conveyed. When this form of communication is discouraged, autistic individuals may learn to mask, censor themselves, or perform scripted social behaviors that feel to the autistic themselves as inauthentic and exhausting. And over time, this can lead to shame, social anxiety, and a sense that their natural way of relating is unacceptable. It also directly affects relationships because autistic people frequently find and sustain friendships through shared special interests. And these interests are how they recognize compatibility, build trust, and experience belonging. When they are prevented from leading with what matters most to them, opportunities for genuine connection shrink, increasing isolation and reinforcing the belief that they must hide who they are in order to be accepted. While we're on this topic, I also want to add that when it comes to employment, a person must be able to either engage in their special interests while working, which would look like a person who loves music, working with music in some capacity, animals with animals, or when it is not possible, that the person must have a job that does not completely exhaust them, so that when they finish their job, they have the time and capacity to engage in their special interests. Either way, it is essentially a fact that for an autistic to be well, they must have considerable amount of time engaging in their special interests. If they don't, they'll manage for a bit perhaps, but they will likely develop symptoms of depression because they are not experiencing enough joy in their life. Next, faking emotions, and next, suppressing stimming. So stimming refers to repetitive movements or sounds that people make to self-regulate emotions, manage sensory input, or express feelings like excitement or anxiety. So some examples are picking at your nails, pacing, repeating language. So it might be lines from a movie or what was just said or a favorite word. Um, Chewing the inside of your mouth, rubbing your fingers or toes together, flapping your arms. Autistics are often shamed for their stimming and explicitly asked to, or forced to stop. And they might be told that their stim is childish or annoying or distracting or just not appropriate. But stopping a stim may have a big impact on a person's mental health because stims function to help a person self-regulate. So this means that when a person is anxious or overwhelmed, the person will stim as a way to cope with or handle or work through the distress. So when an autistic cannot stim, they will have greater difficulty managing stress because their natural way of coping has been taken away from them. Often I am helping my clients find ways that they can stim that are effective for them, but also safe enough or appropriate enough so that they're not ostracized at school, work, or home. One of my lifelong stims that I'm able to do from my home office here, but I do not bring out into public spaces, is scratching at my blanket right here that my mom crocheted for me when I was a baby. This is a stim that presents as very childlike, I get. And I do not feel safe doing this in public, as I know I would be very much made fun of, or just kind of people would question this. But I share with you right now to normalize this experience in case this resonates with some of you, or perhaps some of the people you work with. Our next example of masking is ignoring sensory overload. For example, pushing through discomfort from loud noises, textures, lights, without reacting visibly. And then managing food textures. For example, moving food around a plate or saying that you're full to avoid sensory issues with certain foods. This can be particularly hard during the holidays when large groups of people are gathering and there's added pressure to eat the foods that the family has prepared. My clients often share the distress they experience at these meals because their family expects them to eat foods that are nearly impossible for them to consume. So while masking is difficult and carries real costs, it can also provide important benefits, which is why autistics may be very grateful to be able to mask. It can increase safety, reduce the risk of bullying or discrimination, help someone access education, employment, or healthcare, and make social environments more navigable or even just safe. Some people have to be able to mask or their life may be threatened. But when an autistic person's life requires masking in certain settings, they need to also have regular opportunities to unmask. They need time and space where they do not have to perform, suppress their needs, or translate themselves. These periods of unmasking allow the nervous system to rest, restore a sense of ease and authenticity, and reduce the cumulative stress that leads to burnout and mental health decline. So what might that look like in real life? For children, it might look like being able to mask throughout the school day, if that's accessible to them. But when they get home, they will need time and space to no longer perform and to be in their most authentic expression of themselves. Or for adults, they might be able to mask through the workday, or at least during the work meetings. But once they get home or the Zoom call is over, they need time and space to feel safe enough to unmask. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So Recovery from autistic burnout is supported by approaches that reduce the nervous system load and restore safety, autonomy, and authenticity. Here on the slides, I have listed a number of supports, but I'm going to speak to one key factor that contributes to healing. Essentially, the person needs to understand what they need to heal, what their needs are, and get those needs met as much as possible. While this might seem obvious, it is my experience that many people do not recognize and listen to their body's needs. One reason that I see a lot is that the person learned at a young age that there was something wrong or abnormal or unhealthy with their needs or preferences. This happens very easily when a young child expresses distress and their caretakers either do not attune to or perhaps even notice the child is in distress. Or they may notice the child is in distress, but dismiss it as not relevant, saying, "You'll be okay," or "Don't worry about it," or "Nobody else has a problem with this. Why are you?" So a child will soon develop the ability to say this to themselves. A little voice will notice a concern and then dismiss it as not relevant. This adds up because sometimes these needs really matter for a person's nervous system to be at ease. So I will use an example we can all relate to, I think, with the idea of nails on a blackboard, or this might be a green board or something, for those of you who were around when blackboards were used. In any case, imagine if growing up, people around you were often scratching blackboards. And every time you heard this, you felt tremendous anxiety, pain even, and your body wanted it to stop. Well, what might happen if the people around you said it was not a problem? You might begin to distrust your body's ability to assess and attend to your body's needs. You might find yourself living in a constant state of anxiety and attend to your body's needs. Oh, sorry. You might find yourself living in a constant state of anxiety as each time that you hear the blackboard being scratched, you dismiss your body's need to get away from it. So let's fast forward years later, and now you are in a nearly constant state of anxiety, and you're being impacted by aspects of the environment that you do not even recognize as impactful. And for some humans, there are things that we can just get used to. In fact, there may be some humans that can get used to the sound of nails on a blackboard. But as a whole, autistic brains do not habituate to stimuli in the same way that a non-autistic brain does. So for example, the non-autistic brain will hear the fire alarm, be alerted, and then the brain will be able to start tuning it out because the brain is equipped to be able to habituate to the stimulation in this way. The autistic brain will continue to be alerted to the fire alarm in the same way each time the sound is heard. I have clients that are sensitive to the sound of the AC in my office. It's unfortunately quite intrusive. And the non-autistic brain can take that sound and say, this is not relevant anymore, and it can become background sound. So when an autistic learns that something they experience as harmful doesn't matter, but their body and mind is still being impacted as if it does, a person will struggle to identify their needs and attend to them. Another reason, however, that I want to touch on that might make it hard, if not impossible, to attend to a person's needs is the cost of doing so. For example, what do we do when a person is deep in autistic burnout and needs to have alone time and even knows it, but they have to earn money, and if they take off any more time from work, they will lose their job? What happens if they have a child to care for? This is the reality of most people I work with. I remember a person I met who was in burnout. They worked full time and had little kids. They were either at work or at home parenting for the kids as their partner was also overwhelmed and needed my client's support. I told them, you are going to need to find a way to get some alone time so your body can recharge. And they explained to me that that was not an option. They had to keep going. I get that. And no doubt, humans can do very hard things. But it was clear based on their symptoms that they were heading deep into autistic burnout. And I suspected their current ways of engaging were not sustainable. Indeed, they let me know 2 weeks later that they had been fired from their job. It was so clear to me in witnessing this that when we do not take charge to make changes our body needs, that changes will automatically happen because our body will eventually make sure it gets what it needs. Indeed, this person had not been able to maintain their workload because they were experiencing loss of skills due to autistic burnout. It's also possible that a person may recognize their needs and it may even feel safe for them to get those. I'm sorry, it may even be safe, not feel safe. It may even be safe for them to get those needs met technically. For example, perhaps they do have the resources to lower the demands of their life and take a break or unmask and live more authentically. But some people have learned throughout their life, either explicitly or implicitly, that their authentic way of being was wrong and not safe. They have experiences of being shamed, bullied, physically or emotionally abused due to who they are. So they have fierce protective parts within them that will not allow them to freely express themselves. This makes so much sense. This is where I find neurodiversity affirming counseling to be really helpful. Through counseling, a person may be able to recognize that indeed it is safe enough now, and that the conditions that led to harm in the past are no longer present. And the parts of them that protected them from the hurt in the past may now soften and allow more authentic ways of being to present in their life. Next slide, please. Okay, so burnout versus depression. Although depression and autistic burnout can look very similar on the surface, they are actually quite different and require different supports or treatment. One key difference is that with depression, the person loses interest in engaging in the world or doing things that once brought them joy. The person will not want to do it. With autistic burnout, the person still wants to do these things they love, but they can't because the physical and mental capacity is not there. Another key way to distinguish them is that burnout symptoms are closely linked to demand load, which means that autistic burnout symptoms often worsen with increased demands and improve with demands when demands are reduced. Whereas depression may persist even in supportive or low demand environments. Treatment also differs. With depression, we'll focus on cultivating renewed interest in activity, and medication might help in some cases. And again, with autistic burnout, it requires reducing activity and expectations, increasing accommodations, supporting unmasking, and restoring nervous system safety. One challenge that autistics often face is that they do not get this proper support to heal autistic burnout. And then with time, they also become depressed. As you can imagine, being in autistic burnout for a prolonged period of time is tremendously stressful. And it's very common to, with time, experience symptoms of depression. Treatment is then a bit tricky as the treatment for depression and autistic burnout conflict. One suggesting the person needs to re-engage in the world, and the other suggesting the person actually needs to decrease their expectations, take space and alone time. So suffice it to say that individuals in this state need to be working with a mental health counselor who deeply understands autism and can support healing of both autistic burnout and depression. I might also say that the family needs to be seeking help as well, as usually there is something happening in the home that is contributing to the distress and slowing the process of healing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next is pathological demand avoidance, or PDA. But I first want to share a little story that I have about a zebra. Imagine that we have a group of zebras in their natural environment, and we observe their behavior and take notes on how they engage in the world. And we take one of them and we put it in a cage, and we start taking notes on its behavior. We can imagine that in this situation, the zebra's behavior would change. And if we started to notice new behaviors, odd behaviors, perhaps, we would conclude that the change in behavior was likely due to the zebra no longer living and being in its natural habitat. And all of us, I would hope, would have great compassion for the lack of freedom that this zebra now had. We would all wish it could run free as it had before it was caged. But we would all clearly recognize that the odd behaviors that the zebra was now exhibiting, that these were not behaviors that were inherent to being a zebra, but rather they were the result of being a zebra in a cage. I see this experience happening in some humans, that some humans were not designed to be living in these conditions that we currently face. And specifically right now, I am speaking of the expectations and the demands which are now inherent to living in our society. Through my personal life and my work, I've come to understand that some humans were designed needing a tremendous amount of autonomy, and they need this autonomy in all aspects of their life. It's pervasive. So that leads us to pathological demand avoidance. Next slide, please. Okay. So pathological demand avoidance, which is also referred to as pervasive drive for autonomy, is considered by most to be a profile of autism characterized by an extreme anxiety-driven avoidance of everyday demands and expectations. Examples of everyday demands or expectations might be brushing teeth or asking for help when you have a problem, or responding to a text, or showing up to an appointment. It might also include things that the person really wants to do. Actually, it often does include that. Because once we want to do something or we agree to do something, it can quickly become an expectation. For example, the person might sign up for an art class only to feel tremendous panic once they realize that they now have to go to a class, even when it is a class that interests them. The body essentially responds to expectations or demands as if they are an actual threat, causing the nervous system to have a strong fight or flight response. And to cope with what is experienced as a threat, PDAers need to regain control or autonomy. That is their sense of safety. So they will do whatever they have to do to get out of the demand and to regain a sense of autonomy or control. So let's just pause and think about what the average professional might tell a person if they're having a hard time meeting the demands of life. Or what might a parent be told to do to help their kid meet the ordinary demands of life? We would likely draw up a chart, maybe give some rewards or consequences, or write up a schedule. Maybe we would help the person understand why these tasks matter. What's the purpose? We'd explain how important it is to brush your teeth or get the homework assignment turned in. If there was a particular issue, like maybe the taste of the toothpaste is too minty or whatever, we would try to accommodate and find solutions. And so many people seek help for this problem and they get these types of solutions. But these types of solutions do not work for PDAers. In fact, they likely will make things worse because they reinforce the fact that these tasks are expected of them, causing greater anxiety as a result. So, guess how I might help a PDAer who's telling me that they want to brush their teeth, but they can't? I help them understand that they will actually be more able to brush their teeth if they let go of this concept that they should brush their teeth. Because once they have choice in the matter, once they have autonomy to choose what they want, a task can now become more accessible. The trick is to find a way to transition something from a demand to a choice. Next slide, please. So we are going to very briefly go through what are identified as PDA traits. Number one, resists and avoids the ordinary demands of life. And we've already touched on some examples of that. Number two, uses social strategies to avoid demands. The ways that PDAers avoid demands can be quite creative and they may present as confusing as well. So they might negotiate or distract or use humor or make excuses, or they may even take on the role of another character. Let me give an example regarding giving excuses. When they give excuses, the excuse may not make any sense. You might be very confused. For example, you might get a person pizza for his birthday, and because it is his favorite food. But because it is now expected that the person eat the pizza, the person is unable to meet the pizza as the expectation is experienced now as threatening because the person perceives they have lost autonomy. So they might say, I don't like pizza. This will be very confusing for those around the PDAer because they usually love eating pizza. This will be confusing for the PDAer themselves. Because how does one make sense of not being able to do something that they actually love doing? How maddening must that be? I say that PDAers can have a different storyline. It's a story that reflects a survival response when a PDAer perceives they have lost autonomy and balance in their life. I know this sounds quite bizarre to some of you, and you might be thinking I'm even making this up. But these types of scenarios are quite common for PDAers. I often hear a person say, but he wanted to do it. It is very common for a PDAer to agree to do something, like all humans, because indeed they want to do it, only to not be able to do it. So one thing PDAers notice is it can be easier to do something spur of the moment than to plan for it. Because once the planning starts, the expectations or sense of demand increases. Number three, this is an interesting one. Appears sociable on the surface, but lacks depth in understanding. So many autistics that are PDAers might present as very sociable. They might be the class clown or the one that is greeting and engaging with everyone. But if you look more closely, the person will be struggling with some of the insights or intuitive understanding that may be needed to effectively communicate and maintain relationships. So these are people that might make friends easily as they are quite social, but they struggle to maintain the relationships, especially as they get older. Number four, experiences excessive mood swings and impulsivity. And the impulsivity might also look like doing something very shocking, very shocking. And that causes others to get mad or be in disbelief. There's more, there's more I could speak to all of this, but due to time, I'm going to leave it at that. Number 5, obsessively focuses on other people. This is another very interesting difference. They will often have a bit of a special interest in people and may place tremendous energy and time trying to connect with or be with other people, more so than what you might see in a non-PDAer. And lastly, number 6, appears comfortable in role play and pretend. I understand this is not always a trait, but is commonly a trait. PDAers may be very, very creative and have brilliant sense of humor. They may thrive and feel more autonomy in costume or in a role, and meeting demands and expectations can sometimes be more accessible when they're dressed as a favorite character, for example. Okay, so back to our zebra. It's my belief that I'm sorry, next slide. Thank you. Our zebra. It's my belief that hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the PDAers were thriving. They were the ones often wandering the forests and climbing and jumping out of trees and finding the path across the river and finding food for the community. They lived deeply connected to the land and the animals and helped us explore and guided us in our relationship to nature. Their innate curiosity and sense of adventure and passion for freedom was nourished in the conditions we once lived in. I believe that what we identify as PDA now, these traits that I just spoke of, in my mind, is like describing a zebra in a cage, that these behaviors are not innate to these people, that they are a result of a lack of freedom that they have in our society, conditions for which they were not designed. So for PDAers, what helps is cultivating autonomy, collaboration, and flexibility. What harms is anything that communicates, you must comply to be safe or accepted. Next slide, please. Okay, here I will speak very briefly. As you may notice, we are at the end of our time, but in brief, many autistic people live with co-occurring physical or body-based medical conditions, and these conditions place enormous chronic strain on the nervous system and significantly impact mental health. Dr. Melhauser, who's based up in Vermont, and you'll see our website at the bottom of the screen, has identified these co-occurring physical conditions as all the things, and it has kind of stuck in my head. Her website is a great resource, but I also want to just speak very briefly to each of these to give you guys a sense. Mast cell activation, or MCAS. This is a physical health condition in which mast cells release inflammatory chemicals inappropriately, leading to symptoms such as allergic type reactions, gastrointestinal distress, headaches, flushing, and heightened sensitivity to foods, smells, and environmental triggers. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, are connective tissue conditions that affect joint stability, pain, fatigue, often resulting in chronic pain, frequent injuries, and physical instability. And postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS, is a form of dysautonomia, I believe it's the most common, involving difficulty regulating heart rate, blood pressure, particularly when standing, and leading to symptoms such as dizziness, fatigue, brain fog, and rapid heart rate. So many of you may know a person who says they can't exercise or do anything such as chores outside because they can't stand the heat and something starts to hurt. Many times we treat this as a mental health condition because people have not understood the underlying physical medical conditions that may be causing these conditions. I am increasingly understanding how impactful these co-occurring physical medical conditions are in a person's life and how commonly they are not understood or diagnosed and treated by a doctor. So for autistic people who may already be managing sensory sensitivity, masking, and social stress, this added physiological load can significantly increase anxiety, depression, burnout. Validating and addressing these conditions medically is a crucial part of supporting mental health. The challenge is that most doctors are not familiar or really equipped to do so. So this is why I bring this information to you today. I want to say that if you or someone you know is experiencing these symptoms, do not give up and keep trying to find a professional who might understand. Generally, you will find cardiologists might be more able to assess for POTS, as they will want to rule out other heart conditions. For EDS, you will generally want to meet with a rheumatologist. And for MCAS, you will be looking for an allergist or an immunologist. Yeah, or anyone who specializes in these conditions. This website here has a lot of information about how all these things are connected and will give you more information that you can hopefully help you find answers. Again, the website on that slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, there is a lot that we could speak of here. But given time, I will share one thing though. Humans are more able to get through hard times when they are not alone in it. So many people I work with feel very alone. They feel that nobody understands them. And I oftentimes think they are right. They start to close up and they do not feel safe sharing their story. The most important thing I have learned as a therapist that I have brought into my personal life is that when another person is in hardship and there's no solution to be found, I can be present and listen. Knowing now the healing power of really being present and witnessing another with compassion and openness has helped me cope with the challenge I face of not being able to solve another person's problems. I hope that makes sense. When another person is struggling, this is not the time to teach or instruct or take action. It is the time to listen and sit with them and really get what that person is going through. If the person is having a meltdown, help them stay safe, but let them express. If the person needs space, respect their space. When we can respond in ways that communicate that the other is seen and accepted for who they are, their authentic way of being in your presence, and that their experience, their needs matter, the person will cultivate the internal resources to move through and away from the hard stuff and will be less likely to store such events in their body as trauma. Okay, so here at the end, if you want to switch to the next slide. At the end, and the next one. Thank you. We have a list of resources. These are just some of the ones I've learned from, some of my favorites. Here we have a list of resources about autism, and the next slide is specifically about PDA. And yeah, so if you want to just flip to the next one, there you go. Okay. And so I thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions. May you have any.
So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you and unmute you, or you're welcome to put it into the Q&A for this meeting. No questions or comments? So while they're thinking of their questions or comments, can you share the worst case scenario of a person who was in autistic burnout and also having issues with PDA, and how it impacted their lives physically, and socially.
I mean, I guess we want to look at how do we define worst case scenario, right? It's uh, what this, I mean, I'm going to say, likely the worst case scenario would be somebody who's, um, uh, wanting to end their life. And oftentimes when yeah, I'll just say, when a professional sees that was witnesses that another person wants to end their life, they refer them to a treatment center. And this can make things even worse because uh, as I was speaking to in terms of the autonomy that the PDAer needs, also the types of understanding sensory environments that are necessary to heal. It's often not offered in these spaces, but we do want to refer to a treatment center or residential if there is, a concern about their safety and we're not able to keep them safe at home. But I mean, what this often looks like is the individual will be, I'll just say, shut down. So they'll be in their bedroom and refusing to, certainly if they're in school refusal. Um, and often with PDAs, we'll see that happening as early as that transition from fifth to sixth grade. Often some PDAs, they can't even transition into kindergarten, but oftentimes I do see many getting through elementary school. And then once it's the academic and social demands start to increase around sixth grade, and then again that transition into high school, that's where you see like those crisis periods. And yeah, so I guess
Okay.
that's all I'll say about that.
That makes a lot of sense. It
It's
does.
often a transition. It's often a transition that
Okay.
where there's an increase in expectations.
Okay. And are there any apps that you recommend for working on self-regulation?
Nope.
Any tips, tools, or strategies you have for working on
Self-regulation.
self-regulation? Yes.
I mean, level autism. One of my slides, the end, it said, is it autism level up? Autism something up. One of the websites it has a really there some occupational therapists that have some really cool stuff and trainings. Kelly Mailer, Mahler. She has a lot of work on interoception. The emotional regulation is hard. One, because I mean all the reasons I shared. Another piece is alexithymia, where some people just have greater difficulty kind of sensing, knowing what's going on and knowing whether they need help regulating. So it's just going to be really unique for each person. Often we're going to be working through the sensory system, helping them get space, um, knowing what those signals are when they need to take space, and having kind of like a little bit of a setup either in their car or in a space in their home, or yeah, at the workplace, where they can turn to get their sensory needs and space met. Those are the two things: sensory needs and space.
Okay. Thank you very much. And how do you balance honoring an autistic client for who they are while helping them manage the societal expectations that others expect them to
Yeah.
meet?
I mean, it's going to be unique for every person. We're always looking at, what matters most in this person's life, and what is the cost, right? So
Okay.
it might really matter to show up to grandma's birthday party. But if the cost is you're not going to be able to get to work the next day because you're going to be, whatever, I don't know, right? So we're always looking at what is the kind of the physical, the mental cost of something and aligning that with how much it matters. It's like, how do we know when to buy a sweater or not, right? How much do we like it? How much does it cost? Do we have the money? That's often what I'm looking at and helping my clients is kind of like identifying, making those choices, what really matters to them, how much, and what is the cost, and do they have the money? Because sometimes something might really, really matter to you, but if you don't have the money, if you don't have the energy, then you can't. You
Okay.
just can't. Yeah, there's a cost. Does that? Yeah. hmm
Right. So the cost can be financial, or it can be mental, physical, spiritual, or mental well-being.
Exactly. Yeah, I use that analogy of money because we're all very familiar with that idea that when we go to buy a sweater, we have to ask ourselves these questions, right? But when we
Mm-hmm.
agree to go to a social gathering, we often don't have a series of questions that we're really conscious of. And those are the things that I
Okay.
try to help people to become more conscious of because the answers to those questions really matter. Just like it matters how much money you have in the bank when you go to buy a sweater.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because if you don't have money, you may want that sweater, but you're not getting that sweater.
Exactly. Or you could use credit card, but that might not be
Right.
very wise, right? Especially
Right.
when you have no way of paying back that credit card. So I think the analogy with money is really, really helpful to create it, kind
Okay.
of increase awareness of this stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, Ms. Wilson asks or says or states, as a former VR counselor, what type of accommodations did your clients or participants need?
They needed to be understood, and they often did not get that. Um,
Okay.
I'd say space, being able to take breaks. Um, that really, really matters. Being able to work from home when possible. I write letters of that
Mm-hmm.
accommodation a lot, getting people to work from home. Or
Mm-hmm.
shorter time periods, right? Start with success, right? Start slow or start small and scaffold it and build it up. You want to
Mm-hmm.
start with as much success as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Because I remember I had a young lady I was working with, and she was very successful in her position as a music therapist. But
hmm
her company implemented this new policy where people could self-book their therapy. So
Mm,
she no longer knew what her schedule was going to look like. And I would say within a month of that, she was at risk of losing her job. But I do remember giving her some tools and strategies and some ways to self-advocate for herself,
yeah,
and also connecting her with voc rehab because they're in the habit or they're in the business of helping people maintain employment, not just
yeah,
get jobs, but maintain it as well. So with
yeah,
the
yeah,
combination of those, and advocating for herself, she was able to maintain her job. But that was really stressful for her because she would wake up in the morning and see one thing on her schedule, and 2 hours later, something else would be on her
oh
schedule,
yeah,
and she just could
impossible.
not handle.
Impossible.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is not only to be understood by those around them, which I mean, likely, what are the chances that everyone's going to understand someone, but for the person
Hmm.
themselves. So I find that my clients are now better equipped to be able to go into these spaces, even work with other counselors or other professionals, even
Hmm.
when they themselves don't understand them, because my client understands them. My client
Yes.
understands what they need, so they can speak up or they can kind of navigate it or
Hmm.
translate, interpret. Okay, so when my therapist says that, what that means for me is this.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so self awareness is that is key, and that's why, the sooner we can help somebody understand this about themselves, the more
Hmm.
successful, the less shame they'll take on about this,
Hmm.
and they'll just be able to navigate the world so much more effectively. But really, it's
Yes.
not only the client themselves, but the people around them. If they have a
Right.
partner or family that really
Right.
needs to be able to get this as well and fully accept and get it.
Right. Right. Alex, Zandria D. Molina, you had your hand up and you put it down. Do you still have your question? I do see the TikTok link that you put into the chat. We are unable to access TikTok from the University of South Florida or any university in the state of Florida. So if individuals want to view that, they can do that. So let me see if I can unmute you. so that you can say whatever it is you need to say. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself. Or do you want to put it in the chat? You're unmuted, Alexandria DeMolina.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Question is, how would you map trade? How, how you, the social, when that picture, when that everybody will map, it map, how long you give them to, to calm down and then to talk to them what is the problem and ask them why are you mad?
Okay.
And for
Mm.
all for the financial bit, I'm Burn Potter and I'm the one in charge of the DMF thread and we have everybody a lot of us are talking on the WhatsApp thread. See how long we give them a moment if they're mad and then and we tell them, hey, are do you want to talk about it? Yeah. How long we wait for them to calm down and then we talk to them.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you guys actually allocate time for individuals to unmask for a moment so that they can
Hmm.
re-regulate themselves and continue
Right.
on with their day. And then when you recognize it, you have them address it then instead of letting it build up over time. And by that time, it
Hmm.
may be a little bit too late to address it. Those are
Correct.
wonderful tips and tools. And so that means that you're working at with Project Search at Zoo Tampa. Am I correct?
We no I think so, but I'm we
Oh, you're Alex
in
DeMoyer.
Miami.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm out from the Moore Foundation.
Okay. I read the last name wrong, so I apologize for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
those are
Some of
great.
us here on the call, Jill, yeah, some are guys who work with us are here also on the call.
Well, thank you for that. Because I know I had another young lady who didn't know how to when she was overwhelmed,
Right.
she would become mute. And so what we did is we picked up some responses that were usually appropriate for what was happening at the time when she became
Mm-hmm.
mute, and she could just pick one. I gave her some on a little card, and then I gave her some on a spinner that she could have. It was an app on her phone, so she could just spin it and pick one and say it. She didn't have to figure it out. Just spin it, pick it, show it, and then the environment and the mood would change. So there are
Mhm.
different things that people can do, but you do have to teach them to advocate for themselves. And
Mhm.
one of the things I
Right.
do when I talk about employment first and tools and strategies for K-12 educators and parents and others is talk about those essential skills. And self-advocacy is one of those essential skills that we need to start, not when they turn 18, but we need to start it the day they are born, the
Mhm.
moment that they are able to make decisions and have and be able to express emotions and feelings and thoughts. And it's also very important that individuals have a way to communicate. Whether
Mhm.
they're verbal or nonverbal or using technology, they need to have a way to communicate, and you need to help them figure it out as young of an
Right.
age as it's possible to help with all of this. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Going to the
Rosa has a
chat.
question. Rosa
Okay.
Frost. She says, as a job coach, we don't have any training or where to find help and how to assist our clients in a workplace. I'm very aware of that. Yeah, again, I worked at Voc Rehab. I'm familiar, and myself when I was first starting off at Voc Rehab, I didn't understand this stuff. First of all, the resources that are on the end of my slides, those are some like basic startup like things to learn. I like to say it's not really rocket science. You just have to have interest in really kind of being with it a lot, absorbing however you learn best, whether podcasts or books. There's a lot of free content out there. There's a lot of free content out there. And just reading the books by autistics or finding the podcasts where autistics are talking about their experiences, you're going to start making sense, especially if you're working with autistics. It's going to start like kind of adding up. I also, talking about this is one of my special interests. And so I have, I do this with a lot of gratitude. So if you ever wanted to reach out, if there's a group of people I could speak to, I'd be happy to kind of speak more to your specific questions. And I don't know if we have time for more. It looks like there's another one.
We do have time for that one. And then I have a few announcements after, this last question, but I do want you guys to know that the handout, the link was put into the chat. So you are welcome to get that. And our presenter's contact information is listed in there.
Sounds like they also need to understand their own needs and have a sense of self-awareness. Is there an assessment specific to autistics that I can give them to help them identify their needs as they relate to work? I don't think, and no, I'm not familiar with an assessment regarding this. I mean, I personally, this would be outside of your scope. Actually, I do work a person through all the different traits of autism, and we process how that relates to them and how that shows up in their life. Is This Autism by Dr. Donna Henderson. She has a layperson's guide and a clinician's guide. There's some great questions, I believe, in the clinician's guide that you could use to talk through these different experiences. The CAT Q, that's on embraceautism.com. CAT, I don't know, this thing, -Q, is an assessment for masking. That might be helpful to learn what a person is doing. But I think it's really, really unique to the person, and takes just having a conversation about what is their own unique experience like, which requires that they're talking with somebody who really really understands all the different ways that autism can present, or all the different ways that humans can present.
Yes. That is amazing and awesome, and I thank you for that. And FCIC also has a module that's online, and it's on self-advocacy that anyone can take. We encourage you to do that, because it not only assesses their self-advocacy skills and abilities, but also teaches them some self-advocacy skills and abilities. And then we also have a guide that talks about the skills that need to be taught over time, so that a person can self-advocate for themselves and be able to determine and make decisions for themselves. And those things are free. And we will continue to provide resources on that as well. I would like to share my screen again so I can give out the handout information and the survey information, so that you can have all those. I truly thank you, Chanel, for providing this great information. It's things I've been thinking in my head, but I hadn't been able to find a professional to speak these things. So
thank you.
I thank you. I am so glad that as a person with lived experience, you were willing to share the truth and not what you thought other people wanted to hear. So I truly appreciate that. And I promise you, I will be reaching out to you again, because you were amazing. And
awesome.
I'm so proud that Devin recommended you, because you were exactly what I needed to hear today. So thank you for that. So let me share a couple of things with you guys. We, through the Florida APSE and through APSE, there's the Certified Employment Specialist certification that you can obtain. There are some events that are coming up in the future that you want to participate in. All of this is in the handout. The Florida APSE Summit is coming up in February, and we would love to have you join us there. Remember to continue celebrating and valuing the employment of individuals with disabilities all over. VRT is having an open house, and some information is available for them. Florida APSE National is going to be coming up soon, so you want to share that information. If you're in the Hillsborough County area, they're having an ADA celebration in July. You're welcome to attend. Hillsborough County is also having created a plan for the future. The Allen Bell Scholarship deadline to apply is coming up very soon. And if you are interested in getting a certificate of attendance, and it does have APD CEU codes on it, you can take this survey. You can scan this QR code or look in the chat for the link. And once you do it, I'm almost guaranteed that a thank you letter will come up and it will have the link to the certificate there. I've changed the way that I do it, so it should be available to you immediately upon completing it. And it'll come as a separate email. So I thank you all for your time and attendance. Charnel, do you have anything you'd like to say
No, and I'm
or
sorry,
express?
I have hidden myself. Can you hear me?
That's fine.
Okay.
We can
No, I
see you.
don't. Oh, you can see me? Okay. I want to say, no, I just want to say thank you. Sometimes I have spoken about this and it kind of falls flat. And so having this experience where people actually genuinely had questions and, it means a lot to me in my just personal and professional growth. So I thank you a lot.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you back 18 minutes of your time. I truly appreciate you joining us today. We are going to have a webinar on March 6th, and it's the original one that was scheduled in November. It was rescheduled for March 6th. So you can enroll for that one, or go to our website, get the link, and re-register for that one again. We truly appreciate you joining us. Again, Florida APSE Summit will be in February, and it's in St. Augustine, and we hope that you can join us. And our employment virtual conference this year will be on youth work readiness, and that will be held in May. So look to see information coming out about that soon. Thank you all very much. I truly appreciate you. And if you know of an excellent youth program across the state, doesn't matter where it is in the state of Florida, please send me that information so we can potentially have them speak or show a video highlight of them during our EBC conference in May. You guys have a great day and enjoy your weekend. Thank you. Bye.
Please visit our website for more information about our programs, projects, and how you can get involved.